Welcome. I am Annette Reeder from thebiblicalnutritionist.com. And today you are in for a delight. I am so glad you joined us here on podcast and on YouTube, because my journey through life, my journey through this transformation of just living life as it came upon me to being intentional with my life, with my health, with my biblical studies, all of that has brought me to people that have totally made a difference in my life. And I know you know what I'm talking about, because we all have those people. It's like, okay, I'm so glad I met that person. Well, several years ago, I was at a training conference for John Maxwell down in Orlando, Florida. I knew I needed better leadership skills, so I signed up to be trained by the best. And one of the people that I met is who I'm going to talk with today, who is Dr. Brian Sorrell. Many people affectionately just call him Doc. So you can call him Dr. Sorrell, you can call him Doc, whatever you choose. The main thing is he has so much insight and so much wisdom that we all can learn from. And yet, recently when I was talking to him, he shared a life-changing story that I really want you to understand, because it includes all of the elements that I've been trying to teach you about how to implement fasting and intentionally memorizing scripture and just seeing what God is going to do in your life. So sit back. You're going to be amazed. I am so excited for this interview today. I've been waiting for it for quite a while. And this is Dr. Brian Sorrell. So welcome, Doc. I'm so glad this day has finally arrived.
Hey, thanks, Annette. I'm so privileged to be on here with you guys. So thanks a lot for asking me.
Yeah, always a joy. And for those of you watching, I attend his coaching calls once a week. All great coaches have a coach. And that's just the bottom line. So if you want to always be intentionally improving your ways and the way you work with people, the way you mentor people, then you definitely need to check into his programs. But first of all, we have to start with your story about your grandson, because that's the most amazing story ever. So share with us what's about yourself, and then take us to what happened with your grandson.
Yeah, I'll just back you up with a little bit of my background. I was a trainer in college, and always tried to make lemonade out of lemons. And I had a couple injuries. I was a really good athlete, but could never stay healthy. I was that athlete that always kept getting hurt. Became a trainer and was planning on going to college to be a trainer at the university level and then pro level, where I'd take care of sports injuries and things like that. And in that journey, I lost my ability to do that simply because the team got killed in a plane accident. Wow. Back in 1970s, late 70s, and it was Wichita State. And that was where I was headed. Well, then we had to make a pivot, and I decided that I would just go ahead and get my essentials done in the first few years of college. And I'd work my way through school, and I was a trainer at the community college there when I started. Next thing I know is I love science. So anything about nutrition, anything about science, I just love that. So when they said you get electives, well, all my electives were there. And one day I sat down with the counselor, and he goes, "Hey, Doc." Well, he didn't say, "Hey, Doc," at the time. He said, "Hey, Brian." He said, "Did you know you have a pre-med thing set up here?" And I go, "No, I didn't know that." And I said, "I just like science." Yeah. So I had worked my way through doing that. Not happen chance. I think the good Lord always leads you into different circumstances. But I always admired this one physician that loved his patients, been loved by the community, never had a bad word said. He had 12 children, 6 boys, 6 girls. He was always involved with the community. I so admired him. And he happened to be a chiropractic physician. And I also was looking at medical school at the time. But what I noticed was his walk, his ability to help and love people was so special to me that it influenced me to go check out what it was about him. And I also found out that when I would send my athletes to the doc, they would take them off for 3 weeks. I'd send them to this guy, and he'd be next day, they'd be having their best performance. I'm thinking, well, what does this guy know that this guy doesn't?
Exactly.
I didn't know. And I didn't have any idea, no inklings, what one kind of doctor was or the other. So I went to Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, checked out the college and finished my school and my college, and then went to postgraduate school and got my chiropractic degree there. But not all chiropractic is equal. I mean, you start with the basis. It's like a general practitioner. You don't always specialize. And I specialized in sports medicine, high performance, and nutrition, because I found out that as time went on in my practice, and I practiced over 20 years, as time went on, I noticed patients didn't respond as well. And I'm thinking, well, why are they not healing? They're the same type of things. And is it me, or is it something I'm missing, or what is it? And I found a common denominator, that nutrition was in there, because my grandparents ate way different, from the garden, from the fields.
Right.
I mean, I had herbs. I had pickled foods. I mean, we had sauerkraut. We had pickled pig feet. We had everything my grandmother made. It's hard to believe, but all those fermented foods were in there too. But we didn't get that anymore. And I noticed it had a response. So it set me off into a postgraduate education in applied kinesiology along with nutrition. And I wanted to see what made people tick and why was one person. I read a book that was life-changing. We all have those moments, those books maybe that we've got that just make a turn, 1 degree turn in our life. And this was by Dr. Homewood, and he was out of Dallas, Texas. Years and years ago, it was out of print. The book is out of print. You can't get it. And it was called Anything Can Cause Anything.
Wow.
And it really, the gist of the deal is don't look at symptoms. I learned through chiropractic medical studies that all the 90% of diseases all have the same symptom. So you can't memorize them. You'll go crazy.
Very
and
true.
you can't really treat them. That's the dilemma of my good friends that are in general medicine. They give a pill for a potion and et cetera. And I'm not anti-medicine, by the way. I've got a medical doctor's son. I got a neurologist son. I've got a chiropractic son and brother. So I've got all the avenues covered. But what's interesting is that I wanted to be able to have people have an influence. And I noticed a long time ago that less is more. Basically, anything can cause anything. So what is the real cause of the problem? Sometimes it was your job. Sometimes it was a relationship you were in. Sometimes it was a chemical you were eating or types of foods. So it could be a chemical cause, a spiritual or emotional cause, and it could be a physical cause. Okay, so in those 3 categories. So equilateral triangle. I always said the foundation. I changed that later to a pyramid, because the bottom of the pyramid is actually spiritual. Then there's your emotional health. Then there's your physical health. There's your relationship health. And then the other side of the pyramid was your financial health, because all those create stresses on the body, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So that's been kind of my journey. I loved being in practice. In 1992, I found myself walking out of a doctor's office, and he's saying I would never be able to practice again. And I thought, it didn't really sink in. You know, it's like, you won't be able to practice. 6 years later, I was in an injury, had a spinal cord injury, lost use of my left arm, was in severe pain for 6 solid years. Wow. When you're in so much pain, sometimes you're willing to do anything, I found, even if it's against how you feel. It's hard for me as a natural healthcare physician to have somebody injecting 6-inch needles in your spinal cord while you're setting up, but you do what you got to do to get through. Mm-hmm. And but I made a decision one day, and I found myself 5 years later, all the stress. I had to sell my practices to survive. I had been in this kind of pain for 6 years now. I was raising my 2 youngest kids. I had gone through a divorce, and I found myself in Kansas City, which was about 3 hours from where I normally lived. And I was walking out of the physician's office with deja vu again. You're never going to be able to practice again. Just take these pills. By the time I got home, I was so angry. I threw those pills down the hallway, and I'm yelling at them. They're rolling down the hall, and I'm screaming at them like, I'm not taking you. I am not taking you. I'd drawn a line in the sand and said, what? I'll tell you, Jesus and I had a real conversation for all night long. I cried, I wept, I yelled, I hollered. I just said, why me? All the gamuts. And when I got up that morning, there was a knock at the door, literally. And there was a guy named Willard who used to bring my kid to church. And so he did that for a youth group, and I never knew the guy. I didn't know he retired and moved to Kansas City. He only lived a mile from where I was living. And he said, I'm not here to see your son, Matt. I was here to ask you if you'd come to a meeting. And I said, what kind of meeting? And he said, well, would you come and check this nutrition thing out? And I go, oh, no. Thank you, but no thank you. I'm not looking for anything right now. Out the door, I pushed him. In fact, I was kind of rude. So I'm thinking, I got to make amends to this guy. This isn't normally the way I treat people. So I called him that night and I made amends. I'm going to come to your little meeting. Little did I know it was going to be a life transformational step. You never know when you answer the door and your yes, what it leads to, whether it's for you or some others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself setting in some sweats. By that time, I'd put on about 65, 70 pounds because of the epidural injections and steroids I was on. I'd gotten off of them by that time, but I was in a process of trying to figure out what am I going to do to get better. I cried out to God. God sometimes answers prayer in strange ways. I go, I'm tired of doing this. I'm not going to take these pills, but what can I do? The next morning, knock, knock, knock. Guys, it's simple as that sometimes. It may not show up that, but I went there simply to make amends. So I was sitting in the back and they'd given me a nutritional product. And it was the first time I felt normal. And I just had a drink. And I'm going, what's in this stuff? And the guy got nervous that was doing the presentation because he knew I was a doc. So he got all kind of, I said, don't worry. I'm the fat guy in the chief sweats. Don't worry. You don't have to worry. Hey, a lot of us docs never even had nutrition in our background. We had to go get it ourselves.
Right.
It's not taught at most schools. It is now starting to be integrated medicine. But what they call integrated medicine guys out there is real kindergarten compared to real integrative medicine.
Exactly.
They're trying to play catch up. And gratefully so, but they're just not, they're decades behind. But that all being said, it wasn't the company that I told. 2 months later, I found myself on an airplane sitting in front of the stage, and this guy was there and on stage speaking to everyone, and he was inspirational. He was motivational. He was inspiring. And I'm thinking, wow. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you, he was a quadriplegic. He was speaking from a wheelchair.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, wow, what a big slap in the face. I've got 3 good limbs, one's not working, and I'm feeling sorry for myself. So 2 things came to mind at that place. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Go change it. Get off your duff and go do something about it. And the second thing is, I can do something. I can help somebody somewhere. This guy had just finished his first marathon as a quadriplegic. I'm like, wow. And he just passed away, I heard recently. So it was 23 years he was out inspiring, motivating and helping other people. And I thought, wow, how that's me. What can I do to get home? So by the time I got home, I decided that would happen. So the reason I'm sharing some of these stories is kind of a journey, life kind of hands you some things. We all don't have cool things that happen. Being a parent and a grandparent, I've lost my parents, two of them to cancer, and one to alcoholism. Okay, and I'm very open about that because they're all isms, and I lost a son 10 years ago. This June will be in 2 weeks. Was a pastor's son at 35 to cancer, and man, what a guy, heart for God. And the reason I'm sharing that early is because I want to share a little story that happened more recently. Okay.
Yep.
About making changes today. What can you do? And so, I always say our biggest lessons, our biggest thoughts, our learns are from the pain that we have, the uncomfortability. I always say pain and pleasure are the 2 things that move us, and pain moves us way faster or deeper than anything. And our lessons are way deeper. I'm not saying learn the hard way, because I always say you can get a mentor and learn. And I always say this question, Annette, you've heard me say it before. If it happens sooner with less effort, would that be okay?
And I always say yes.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not work, but I always say find a mentor, someone who's been where you've been, get the wisdom and find out where he's had to make the pivots and directions. Now, I'm not saying mimic him 100%, but I'm saying quite a bit. If you'll just learn from his failures, so you either get a mentor, and you have to pay for proximity, by the way. John Maxwell wasn't free to us, right?
Right.
But it was an exchange. All that was an exchange of his time for some finances. And that's the way the good Lord made it. We have to exchange efforts, time, finances, something to get better. There's no free lunch. Guys, I hate to tell you, there's nothing free. I do like to say taste and see. I like to tell people, I like to give them an opportunity to taste and see.
Yep.
But what happened? So if you speed that up as a journey, I was that company. I was had the full blessings to make 7-figure incomes through it over the last 20 years, and that pivoted and changed as I'm starting to make some differences and changes today. I believe that you should all have several sources of income, by the way.
Yes.
So, but you can't focus on 4 or 5 things at once. You create businesses that can take care of themselves and they grow on their own, and then you create something else. So you have to focus where you're at. So find the one thing, that one step you can do today, I always say, and that'll help you. So let's go right up to today. And I think it was January. I got some news. It was actually in December. My grandson hadn't grown for about 1.5 years, and he's just turned 4. And of course, mother's instincts, never argue. I found out when mothers brought their children in, always listen. I tell it to my doc friends all the time. Shut up and listen to mom. She's connected. She was connected at birth with an umbilical cord. She knows her babies. And even if it's a 6th sense, she has that. And so listen. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a few that have gone over the top, but I'm saying for the majority, listen. Yes. And my daughter said, I'm going to take him to the pediatrician. I said, well, I was small when I was, a kid, and her husband was small all the way through life, and et cetera. So when she takes to the pediatrician, they find out he has what's called hypercalcemia, which he's dumping all his calcium out of his body, so he's not growing. But the underlying cause is usually a tumor. And it could be a parathyroid benign tumor, or it could be cancer, either way. And so his kidneys are getting ready to shut down. So they don't know, they've got an emergency going on. And now we're in Children's Mercy Hospital. We're doing all the stuff. They now have all the cancer markers are positive. All the tests are showing that's need to be, and et cetera. Well, all I know is you feel pretty helpless. And I was having deja vu, a flashback to when my other son had cancer. And we did everything we possibly could, because he had only 200 people in the world at that time had his particular kind of cancer. But because I had extra income from my other side business, by the way, I was able to fly him all over and do the alternative things to feel like I gave him his best option and opportunity, as that did. But I started, a friend of mine started a Proverbs challenge on January 1. And I decided that I was going to fast and pray and have discussions with God every day. And that's really what I called them. So I found myself getting up earlier and earlier and earlier, as early as 4 some mornings, and I would be doing as much as a 2 to 3 hour walk at times. I didn't let that be governed. I just had this idea. What can I do? I need to be healthy and feel better and to support my kids, and I'm not going to be able to do it. When you had the COVID thing, I said, well, what can I do? If 78% of the people that are having complications or dying from COVID are obese, and the definition of obesity is someone who carries 30 pounds too much weight. See, we all think obesity is huge. Somebody 600 pounds. Mm-hmm. No. If you're carrying 30 pounds more weight, check your BMI and talk to your physician and get your markers made. And I always believe in doing that, getting a good physical and watching your markers. Because as you change, you should watch those things change.
Exactly.
But oh, by the way, so I start the Proverbs challenge, and the fast went in. I did what I was calling intermittent fasting. So I would get my calories in about a 3 to 4 hour block a day. Before you guys are out there and you jump onto fasting and all that, look into it. And if you've got healthy conditions, consult your physician. I mean, not all fasts are equal to everybody's deal. And I had some days where I went 72 hours. Okay. If I felt that that's what the good Lord was telling me. What was interesting is it turned on an acute awareness. I don't know if any of you have fasted before, but man, when the digestive system shuts down, all the brain, blood goes to the brain and your spirit, and you get in contact. And that's why so many times it's biblical to fast and to really focus. And boy, God and I had some of those same discussions I had when I got injured that day that I was sharing earlier. I mean, I'm real with my God. So sometimes it might sound like Doc Brian's arguing or Doc's having an argument going on because I'm very vocal, but he's real. He knows my heart. He knows I love him. And that's no deal. So as that journey goes on, I decided I would do a 90-day fast, and that I would be in deep prayer, and I would work to change, and that there would be some transformational change. What's happened to me over that 90 days, if someone was going to ask me, they go, oh my gosh, my brothers this weekend, they had Brothers Weekend. We get together once a year. They all give us a t-shirt. Well, they gave a t-shirt of my old shirt size, and it was 3 sizes too big, and it hung on like I was a little boy, and everybody laughed. And they go, wow, you were really on a diet. I said, no, it was a secondary benefit of fasting and praying and seeking God's will. And I understand, I believe God intends. It's the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I believe miracles can happen. I've had a stepson and now a grandson that God's chose to have a miracle happen. But it was a gradual thing. So as we started our prayer chain, I connected with other kingdom entrepreneurs, what I call them, people who want to live God's principles and help people know. I don't like to talk a lot of Christianese to people. I think they should know you're a Christian by your love.
Exactly.
And they should be attracted to what's different about you and what is it that makes you different and special. I don't like people, and that's why so many people are getting turned off to a lot of churches nowadays, is because there's a lot of Christianese going on, a lot of doctrinal things, and we're getting back to first century church. People are having conversations like this.
Yep.
And they're getting back to where. So guys, just know this has all been for a reason. And God put us in this time period. I had a 6-year period that I laid on my back in prayer, and God had me in a period of quiet. Now, if y'all know me, I like to talk. And for me to be quiet that long, it was tough in the beginning, but understandable. And the lessons that we'll share that for another time. But the lesson I learned about was just trusting God and doing what I could do. What could I possibly do? I could fast and pray. I could get other people to pray for him too. Laying on of hands, that all happened. I had conversations with my grandson about God, and it's so funny because after this whole experience, he's 4 years old. So he goes, you know what? I'm not as tough as God, but I think I could whip Jesus.
Yes.
So from his perspective, because he knows that, someone will say, who fixed you? And he goes, no more shots, Jesus fixed me. And so what happened was one of the gals who was happened to be in ministry in Africa left me a direct message we were doing a Zoom, and on the comments, she commented over. And so I took a picture of it to keep it, sent it to my daughter. And this was the day before, on Holy Thursday, before Good Friday. And she said, I've been praying for your beloved Quinn. I've been and God's used me for healing before. And as this group is, and we pray for him, the doctors tomorrow are going to see a miracle, and it'll be beyond what doctors believe. And that's exactly what's happened, because they keep having him come back for tests, and it gets better, and he's normal and more normal and more normal. When I say that, it's just gradually getting improved. And get this is a kid who hadn't grown in almost 2 years. Since Good Friday, he's grown 1 inch and put on 7 pounds. Now that's a kid with 25 pounds.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So now the body says, hey, we're using that calcium to grow because it clicked and turned on. And I just believed and stood on that. Now, I have a stepson. I had a similar miracle on. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma years ago, and he's 42 years old today. But I had a son that went on to see God. And in this journey, it can happen either way. So whether God chooses you to walk through and use your life, because he used James's life, even though he called him to heaven, his life was, I couldn't believe how many people he inspired to be pastors that were at his funeral. So I've had both things happen, and both emotions run the gamut. I did say to God, you got James early. I just think you ought to leave Quinn alone for a while. Like I had control, right?
Right.
But I know he knew my heart, and he knew I did. And in that process, I'm down between 35, 40 pounds in that range. I feel energy. I'm there for my kids. I'm listening because, as John Maxwell says, as a grandfather or a grandmother, but he talked from a grandfather's perspective, you're to fertilize your grandkids' dreams. Sometimes we're too busy as a parent. We're just in survival mode. And I see my young parents, my kids all being there, and I see that where a grandparent can step in and make that happen. And I want to put fertilizer on their dreams. One of them wants to be a professional baseball player. He happens to be Dominican, so that might be a chance. I've got one who wants to be an engineer. He wants to make flying cars. I mean, I got one that writes stories. She's a writer. I got one's a dancer. I got one's a gymnast. I got one that wants to be electronical engineer. So you go down and you get to learn, and then you start talking and speaking life over these people, right?
Yeah.
Just like as I spoke life there. So 4:00 in the morning, God and I are having a journey. A lot of steps. I'm up to 20 and 30,000 steps a day now, which is equivalent to 12 miles plus in some days. I'm not saying to do that for everybody, but I found that it's been a time, Annette, that I've been able to get in touch with God's Spirit and have conversations with him. And I don't want to miss out on his messages. I had the opportunity today to meet a young husband and wife that I know are being called. And when you get so in tune, I always say there's three voices, guys, that we listen to. One's our head voice.
Right.
And you hear it every day because it sounds like you.
Yes.
So if you go, oh, I can't do this, or this doesn't sound right, or that, and it's in your voice, realize it's your voice. Then there's that heart voice. I always say it gives you empathy or sympathy, love, connection sometimes. But I always say sometimes that can lead you astray because we can be too sympathetic, and then we allow no boundaries and we allow things to be hurt. And that's where sometimes codependency relies, can be over the top. I'm not saying not to be empathetic now and not to feel for people. What I'm saying is if you're jumping in the boat and sinking with them, you really can't help them. You got to stand on the shore and throw them a lifeline. So be smart here. But then there's that gut voice, that thing I call your noticer. As Christian brothers and sisters, we like to call it the Holy Spirit. And there is that presence. Man strives to know God from day one. He knows there's something more.
Right.
And that really gets, when I walk through fasting and I walk through this health change, I'm getting more and more acutely aware, because that's where you spend. And when you used the word intentional earlier, I tell people there's no such thing as balanced life. So quit trying to balance it. It's intentional awareness. Where do you go and where do you manage your time? That's why you keep track of that pyramid I was talking about. How is your spiritual walk and your spiritual IQ doing today? Are you feeding it each and every day? Are you wanting to know God, really know God? Or do you just want to have a close Jesus? That's the church across the street in just an hour a week.
Right.
Or do you want to live kingdom principles? So it's a spectrum that you got to get in touch. Your emotional IQ. I used to have on my triangle, I used to say there's the emotional / in parentheses spiritual well-being can cause, when it's off, it can cause you to have manifestations of physical conditions. And so like the medical community likes to call it stress. Well, sometimes we got to see where the stress is coming from, right? And it's one of those three. So I used to I felt like as a physician, I could do some stuff for the physical side. And sometimes with the nutritional side, that's why I dig deep. What could I naturally do? And I'm really big on less is more. So if you guys hear me loud and clear, less is more. I'm not saying do little. I'm saying when you find a walk, make a change one step at a time and see where it takes you, where it leads. So for example, if you get rid of all refined carbohydrates in your diet, that means all, A-L-L. I don't understand. It's not sort of. And there's that saying, once in a while I cheat, or et cetera. Can you have a piece of cake? Except, well, sure. I mean, it's okay, but don't think that's normal. I mean, I didn't read anything about birthday cakes in the Bible, but I had a piece of birthday cake the other day and knew it was not normal. But kids are kids, and so aren't you. And so, be kind to yourself. But here's the deal: is making that change. There's a book called by Dr. Canfield. I don't know if anybody's read Canfield's stuff, but it was called Focus. It's an older book, but it's really cool. And he says, focus is not hocus pocus.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then he says on there, that we really need to understand. We need the no exception rule if we want to see disciplines happen. And I believe in compounding consistency. So if you will take one step and do it every day, a minimum of 90 days, I tell anybody, you can change your direction in your health, your spiritual life, etc. If you'll just turn it for 90 days, no exception rule. And I tell you what, I walked in blizzards. I walked in 20 below zero. The reason I did it was to prove to myself that I had no exception. It was kind of like I felt like a mailman. I was going out and wind, rain, or shine. But regardless, and there was 2 times it was so icy I couldn't get out. So I walked in a circle in my basement as I prayed, and I kept track of my steps, and I got my steps in. So there's no such thing as no. It's just an excuse. And I tell people sometimes the only excuses are hurting you. They don't hurt anybody else because
Right.
we kind of have those little mini lies to ourselves. But being intentional and then walking forward. And man, what kind of transformation. I'm in so much more in touch with God today. I hear his voice. If people, it's not audible. I mean, it's not like in Charleston Heston and God says, go get the hill. It's not like that. But I do know. And when he tells me, like today, to go meet this young person, we sat down. And sometimes you don't even know why you're doing it, but you're just being obedient. Okay. And if he says, don't eat this stuff, don't do this, etc. And it isn't like you can't do this, you can't do that. It becomes a part of your spirit. And
Right.
you make those changes. So if just give it 90 days, if they'll just follow your biblical suggestions on nutrition, 90 days, just give it 90 days. And they'll feel better, look better, and perform better. And I always say, for who? If you can't do it for you, then do it for who? I always tell my wife, do it for the grandkids. You want to be here for a long time because we want to have as much influence. Because I want you guys to know, legacy isn't what you leave for people. It's not a financial, you can leave people money, but the biggest change is a legacy is what you leave in people. Be it your friends, your family, whatever it's going to be. And be a willing person. God puts you in people's lives, sometimes as a vessel. I always say for a reason or a season. And that's why I'm always ready to go. And I let God decide whether it's a reason or a season. And I just been willing to lean forward and stuff. Sometimes I'll go, that was good. Have you ever had a time in that when you share something and you're thinking, not only was that good, that wasn't from me.
Yes. And usually I have to keep a notepad handy because sometimes it happens when you're talking to someone else.
Yeah.
And I always have to say, okay, time out. I've got to write that down because that wasn't from me. So
I got a friend of mine who said he'll interrupt the conversations and he'll go, that's a writer downer.
Yeah, that is totally.
So just tell people that's a writer downer for me. So
yes.
The guy made me think today when I was interviewing him, we were just discussing and he was saying, you know what? There's 2 things that happen when we meet. One is I know you're not here for you. Because I've always said, okay, when I meet most people, I think, well, what's he want? What do they really want? But he said that really doesn't trigger that with me. And he said, because I know I'm going to get God downloads. And when you're speaking, you get God downloads. So in the morning, guys, get a journal. It's just a suggestion. You don't have to do a thing. But what I've noticed is my best things are to write them down. Sometimes take a little dictaphone off your phone and God speaks to you, say it. Dreams, ideas, things that he's opening up to channel for you about you, things that you aren't paying attention to, as little as don't eat that stuff. It actually bothers your gut.
Yes.
I mean, those things come into mind. Oh, by the way, speaking of gut, I found that was another thing. My digestion was so much better. And, we talked about, Annette, you're doing a thing with the brain gut connection. And I have found that anything, once I hit 65, I said, anything that can help me have a more acute memory so I can read more. And what I've noticed is there's certain things that you can diet and stay away from, anti-inflammatory diets. That means inflammation. The thing that COVID causes in the body is inflammation.
Yes.
To a process where it overwhelms the body. If you've already got inflammation there, then it just piles on. And that's why some people don't make it, or it's overwhelmed in their system. So try to be as healthy as you possibly can. I want my people that are 50 and above to understand this isn't it.
We have a lot of followers who are in that 50 to 60 category, and they're asking, okay, I'm 61. Can this really work for me?
Mm-hmm.
And your number one step was you made a decision.
Yep.
And so it doesn't matter. And even when I first started this journey, I had read the story by Dr. Rex Russell about his relative who was 79, and they just thought she was on her way out. Her room in heaven was ready, and they just thought she was going there. Well, they decided to apply the 3 principles which we teach, which is exactly what you do, to apply that to her life. And she not only did a turnaround, but she lived to 97 and a very healthy life. And so you are a great example to all of us. You made a decision, and that one decision has led to so many blessings in so many people's lives. And even especially the decision to do 90-day fasting, intermittent fasting, and then walking every day, talking to the Lord, pouring out your heart. Your grandson is dealing with a major health crisis, and you made a decision to step into that life and for your legacy to be a part of him and not what you leave him. Yeah. And then that's a lot for people to just take away from this conversation, that people can really just chew on this for a really long time. And so, yeah. And then going into the gut brain axis. Yeah. That's another reason why you and I connected so well and I share your testimony about that all the time, how because you are one of the key leaders with John Maxwell, and you're able to just do such amazing speaking opportunities. And, you don't have to share your age, but you outperform most people in their 40s. So seriously.
Well, somebody said one time, they said, aren't you, my brothers in particular, we had the weekend, and my youngest brother, he's running 2 of the clinics that I used to own. And he just sold one of them, by the way. So now he's down to 1, and he's probably 55, and my other brothers in their 60s go, aren't you ever going to retire? And I go, no, not planning to. I said, here's what I found is when you retire, you lose your drive, you lose your purpose, and you're just on waiting. What are you waiting for?
Exactly.
I can only play so much golf. Now, I love golf, by the way. I love doing extra things. So if you're a golfer and you like to go out with your 4 guys or your best buddies or 4 ladies and you golf, God bless you for that. That's fine. I love that camaraderie and that community and connection and that inner circle of friendship, because you can count your real friends on one hand. Okay. Yes. If you really look back, who's really been your friend? Sometimes it's people you didn't even realize were being a friend.
Right.
And sometimes you've been called into people's life to be truth tellers. Mm-hmm. All right. And so I'm just willing to be willing. And what I know is I wanted to spend my next third of my life with my hair on fire for God and impacting as many people as I can, leaving a legacy that my grandkids can pass on to their grandchildren.
Yes.
I just believe that God created each step in each generation to do that. When I see millennials and other people get the bad talk, I am very, very up on what's coming up for the young people for God. Seriously, they've got their right place. They just thought, well, I don't want to have to go through what my parents went through. I just want to go serve God. I don't want to go help this person, et cetera. Now we're all poo-pooing it, saying, well, now if they're living at home, that's your fault. Exactly. Okay. I want your parents to quit blaming them because you created it. I'm a big person on none of my kids, I'll be honest, and we could have helped them a lot more financially. I'll be honest about that. but they all paid their own college, their own medical school, their own
I
stuff.
agree.
You know what it is? It was so hard sometimes. One of my sons came to me one time and said, the biggest gift that we gave him was a gift and an example of persistence.
Yes.
Because no matter what seems to happen, he says, sometimes it looks like you caused it. Sometimes it looks like, where did that come from? And sometimes we know it wasn't your fault, but you just dust off your pants, get up and move forward.
Yep.
Having a windshield view of life. And if God is in Colorado today, he's everywhere, by the way, but you're going to the mountains, and I love the mountains. All right. And you're getting that view, and just you get about 30 miles outside Denver, and you're driving across the plains of Kansas. There's not a lot out there in the west. It's pretty flat, but all of a sudden the view comes in. Or are you going to look in the review mirror and continue to keep looking from behind all the things that you didn't? Now, what I say is you need to look at your mistakes. We need to make amends. We need to look at those things, but those are all learns, things that I can get better at.
Yes.
You know, I've been married a couple times. I'm not saying that boastfully. My proudest achievement, I've been married it'll be 24 years this Labor Day weekend to my current wife. And God was a gift. It was a gift to me and my family. And she's considered meme to my grandchildren, and grandmother, Granny C to my other oldest kids. And it didn't matter that she wasn't their mom. She's their mom, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And so those gifts can happen. But I had to learn and to grow up. I teach a thing called Think and Grow Rich, and I do the biblical approach towards Think and Grow Rich. So some of you may have read the book, but I live the book. Just like some of you read the Bible, I want to live the Bible.
Exactly.
It's the living word of God. Are you talking Christianese to people, or actually are you out there living God? You know, living God through you, because people want that. There's an essence that God created you for our own special uniqueness. That's why I don't retire, because I haven't found out what this next chapter is going to bring.
Yes.
And I'm excited to get up more today, more since January 1st started, simply because of the life and the changes that's happened. And I'm calling and proclaiming this year's the Sorrell's Year of Miracles, because we had a miracle on a house thing that happened recently, and moved out of a house, and we decided we would rent, and the economy is going crazy and everybody's paying too much for houses and all that. And a couple days later, I get a message, step into a house. And the guys are moving. It's a physician getting transferred to Mayo Clinic, and no realty fee. We just transferred it over. Everything went bang, 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 bang. But the reason I'm sharing that with you is it's going to close in like 2.5 weeks from the time we've seen the house. People are going to go, that ain't possible. Well, not for man.
Right.
But God's honoring what was happening since January 1.
Yeah.
Those are things, and I'm more acutely aware. And so an attitude of gratitude, an attitude, of forgiveness. I say there's 3 things in order to be rich. You got to learn to love. Love leads everything. There's a certain energy around loving people. And Jesus said that. Love thy neighbor as thyself is the first one, right? Well, love thy God, greater than anything else, but love thy neighbors right behind it. And I say poo-poo to politics, guys, whether you're conservative or not, poo it. Start loving your neighbor.
Right.
Can't put fire, can't increase when you're putting water on it, all right? You love. The other one is forgiveness. Is there anything, because one of the major things that holds on is non-forgiveness. And usually it's non-forgiveness of self. We beat ourselves up. And what did we believe? What were you told as a child? I'm big on speaking life over people.
Exactly.
And I see grandkids and parents, when they get frustrated, they say things to their children that if I could just tape it. So what I do, Annette, is I pattern interrupt people that are doing that. And so what are they going to say? Oh, it's the old man again. I don't really care. God wants you to know what you're saying to this kid. And I heard a parent one time in Walmart saying to a kid, you'll never amount to anything. Dang you, blank this, and you're nothing but this. And I said, time out. I can't listen to this anymore. And I turned to the little kid and I said, don't believe a word of it. And I said, you need to work on where you got to let your anxiety go. You just said this, and this to this child, and he's none of that. He's your gift. See, sometimes people need a pattern interrupt. And pattern interrupt, if you want to know what that is somebody just needs to be waking you up. So put a rubber band today if you want to know how that feels. And every time you have a negative thought, you want to gossip or whatever you want to do, pull that rubber band and let it go and snap you in the wrist. I'll tell you, you'll take it off in about 4 days because it's hurting.
Yes.
But the reason I share that is I want you to know we're not all exempt from having crazy ideas. It's what you do with those crazy ideas and how you just say. I always say, Christ be before me, Satan be behind me. Let's go, Jesus.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah. So let's just kind of bring this to, let's just wrap this up. What you've given people is a choice. Do you want to make a decision and make the life the way you've been dreaming, or do you want to stay where you are? And when you stepped into that decision several times in your life, basically, you already had walked throughout your life how to make a decision and then work towards it. And because of that discipline, when January hit and your grandson was facing this crisis, you already knew how to make a decision and how to step into that decision and that intentional awareness with the fasting, with the walking, with the praying, with the just, sharing your heart with God. And then how that has worked into every area of your life, which it has for years. I mean, this is who you are, because you have walked it so many times. It was what you were aware of, and you knew how to deal with circumstances that were pretty much out of your control. Your grandson was out of your control, but he wasn't out of God's control. And so God used you and that with your grandson to see that miracle happen. And then with everything else you've just shared with us too, it always comes down to, what do we believe? What are we saying to ourselves? What are we hearing ourselves say? So you've kind of just wrapped up our Inner Circle coaching group. You've wrapped up the 40-day transformation, and you wrapped up our fasting course. So all of those have been wrapped up into just one conversation with you today. So you've done really well.
Well, thanks, Annette. Well, I just appreciate you allowing me to share today. Like I said, just being willing to be willing to take the next step. And guys, you don't have to have a plan. You can have a plan, but understand the only step that works is the first one. Then you have to make adjustments, because life is that way. It throws stuff at you. And I've had 8 businesses in my lifetime, and I haven't had one that worked exactly in a straight line.
Exactly. Yes. So true. So true. Well, as you've mentioned, you do mentoring, you do coaching. That is who you are. You're learning more and more about the gut-brain axis and being, skilled in that. And just being you and being available for God to use. That's who you are. That's who Doc is. That's the legacy Doc leaves, is be available and let God work in your life. And that's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us. You've given us so many nuggets that people can listen to this 3 or 4 times, because I'm on 2 pages of notes. If they're paying attention, they are too, because there are so many takeaways. And I really hope people do listen to this 2 or 3 times, especially if you're on the podcast or the YouTube, it doesn't matter. And so any other words that you want to share with people before we end this?
No, just I'm real big on mentor and be a mentor, have a mentor. I think you need to surround yourself. They say your income, and I want to say it a little bit different, your life. Yes. But your income or your life is the average of your top 5 influences or friends. And John Maxwell happens to be one of mine. Now, I'm not living with him every day, but I'm living with him every day, if you know what I'm saying. I study him, I watch the word, etc. So I surround my people that are always constantly striving to be all they can possibly be that God created them to do. And sometimes some of you are thinking, oh, I'm not influencing this big thing. I'm saying you need to start with a micro niche, some little bitty person, somebody. Like I told the guy today, I'm be willing to mentor you, but right now you got to tell me who you're willing to pass that on to now, and that you're actively going to do it as soon as I'm done. So it's almost like, oh, I got to tell you this. I just heard this today from God. Yeah. You need to share that, right? And so find it. So be a mentor, all right, but have a mentor.
Right.
And do the process, because things are not taught, they're caught. And you can't catch them unless you share them.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're so right. So your income is going to be influenced by the top 5 people that you are listening to and spending time with, but also your health is the exact same thing. Your health is going to be reflected by the top 5 people that you spend the most time with. And so that's totally evident in anyone's life. If they come to me with a problem, if you ask them, okay, tell me the top 5 people you spend time with, they're all going to have health issues. So, and it's not that we ditch our friends, no, but we need to separate an area of our life and really focus on listening to the people that know how to do it well, like you. So I appreciate that. All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this YouTube and podcast. This is such great information. And it's information that's been put together very well because it's information that Doc has lived out. And when we hear someone living out these principles that God has taught us, principles that make sense and they make our life more meaningful. And so to meet people like Doc is just a blessing. Yet you may say, well, I wish I could hear more from him. Well, you can. He actually has a coaching call, a mentoring call every week that he has one that's free. And then he also has those that he offers for one-on-one coaching. So we'll put his links down below so you can connect with him personally. And yes, he is learning more and more about the gut-brain axis, so you can connect with him as far as that goes too. And so thank you so much for being a part of this YouTube, of this podcast. I always enjoy talking with you. For those of you watching, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure and hit the like, subscribe, the bell. You know the drill. That just keeps us connected so we can keep sharing with you God's recipe for excellent health. And today we've hit it. We've hit every element of that. We've hit the spiritual, the physical, the mental, and the emotional. And we wrapped it up in a package of a life story that included miracles. If you're on podcast, go ahead and give this a 5-star review and share it with your friends and family, because you are important to us, because God loves you. God loves you from the moment of conception. He has a purpose and a plan for your life. And it is our goal, our desire to help you discover him more and more every day. So thanks for watching and being a part of this. It is always my joy to share with you these testimonies, these interviews, because God is at work and you are part of that plan. Thank you. My husband's doctor was writing prescriptions faster than our hearts were beating with stress. Yet, could there be another way? Is there another answer? Well, that is when a friend suggested to me, Annette, go back into God's Word, start reading it differently, and start with the Daniel fast. Well, those words changed the trajectory of our lives. And 30 days later, we were prescription-free, 35 pounds lighter, combined total, lower cholesterol, lower triglycerides, and we knew that God had answered our prayer for greater health His way. Now, if you are praying for an answer on how to get started, I highly recommend the Daniel fast. First, go to the biblicalnutritionacademy.com website, click on the Daniel fast, and sign up. It's that easy. Plus, the link will be in the show notes below.